Hey, what's up, everybody? Hotel World. This your brother Matthew Daniels, aka Pooh, aka the Chosen Few, aka the Real Bookworm. I'm not a bookworm. I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, world, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. Hotel, cheers to that. Um, As always, I know you guys saw the title. We're going to be talking about how the Great Pyramid in Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza, was built. Now, I know you're all familiar that no one really knows how the Great Pyramid was constructed, how the ancient Egyptians were able to achieve such a magnificent and astounding feat, right? But did you guys know that we do have an account of a Greek, the Greek historian Herodotus? We do have an account of how the pyramids were built. Now, the reason why this isn't mainstream and his account isn't accepted as reliable because a lot of times Herodotus told stories of things that he heard, and there was no real evidence or proof to back up a lot of his claims. He simply told these stories as these stories were told to him. So in the scholastic world, there is a lot of problems with his description, and mainstream archaeology and mainstream historians did not feel comfortable enough to accept the account of Herodotus as an actual account of how the Great Pyramid was built. Again, for one, he wasn't an Egyptian; he was a Greek. He lived. He was born around 485 BCE. The current dates that we have for the Great Pyramid of Giza, they say that it was built by Khufu, whom Herodotus calls Cheops. That was done maybe around 2,400 years ago. So the pyramids were easily around 2,000 years before the time of Herodotus. So there are problems with his story. I want to begin with that. But as you guys know, as being the real bookworm, I do read a lot, and I like to just share information with you guys of stuff that I read. So I think that this is a very interesting account by Herodotus. So what I'm going to be doing for you guys is I'm going to be going into Herodotus' work, The Histories, Book 2, and I'm going to read for you guys his account of how the pyramids were actually built. I'm willing to bet that the majority of you, some of my viewers are very, very astute and they read as much as I do, but I'm willing to bet that the majority of you have never heard, read, or seen this account of Herodotus on the building and construction of the Great Pyramid of Egypt. So we're going to get right down into it. And again, this is coming from Herodotus, the Histories, and we're going to be looking in book 2. So let's start here. He says, the priest said that as long as Ramsenitos was king, Egypt was well governed in every respect and flourished remarkably. Now that guy, Ramsenitos. Okay, there's two scholarly ideas on who that is referring to. A lot of times when you read the works of Greek writers such as Herodotus, they give you the Greek versions of Egyptian names, and you're even going to see that Khufu, who the pharaoh that the Egyptians call Khufu, Herodotus is going to be calling Cheops, the Greek version of his name, right? So this Ramsenitos, okay, one idea is that this is a reference to Ramses III, right? Now, Herodotus is going to go on to say that this pharaoh was the pharaoh before Pharaoh Khufu came into power. Now, this inherently presents problems because Ramses III was, thousands of years after Khufu actually reigned. Pharaoh Ramses II, he was actually in I believe it was the 12th dynasty of Egypt, right? You may want to go fact check that, but I believe it was around like the 12th dynasty of Egypt. Pharaoh Khufu was in the 4th dynasty. So this guy could not necessarily be Ramses the Third, according to Herodotus, because he was thousands of years after Khufu existed. Now, you would also see if you Google his name that they're saying that he was a fictitious king that Herodotus mentioned. Now, who exactly this Pharaoh is and whether or not Herodotus made him up, that is a still a debate and a questions amongst scholars, right? So he goes on to say, but after him, Rampsinitos, Cheops became king. And under his rule, the Egyptians suffered all kinds of misfortunes. So you see that he is saying that Cheops, aka Khufu, became pharaoh after this king, who some people say was a fictitious king, and some people say it was possibly a reference to Ramses the Third. But if it was a reference to Ramses the Third, then Herodotus had his timeline all mixed up. First of all, he closed down all the sanctuaries and prevented the Egyptians from performing sacrifices. Then he commanded all Egyptians to do forced labor for him. Some were assigned to haul stones to the Nile all the way from the quarries in the mountains of Arabia. Once these stones had been conveyed across the river in boats, others were commanded to unload them and haul them to the so-called Libyan Ridge. So he's saying that when Khufu, aka Cheops, came into power, he began the massive building project that resulted in the Great Pyramid of Egypt. He goes on to say they worked in gangs of, and now he's going to describe how it was done. He says they worked in gangs of 100,000 men on each project, rotating in 3-month shifts. So he's saying that at any given time, there was 100,000 men working on the construction project of the Great Pyramid of Egypt. And he said that they rotated in 3-month shifts. So they would take 100,000 men. Those 100,000 men would work on a project for 3 months, and then they would take a vacation, a hiatus, a break, and another 100,000 men would come in and they would pick up where the first 100,000 left off, and then they would work for 3 months, and then they would go on break, and another 100,000, possibly the first 100,000, would begin to work on the pyramids. So he goes on to say, for 10 years, the people labored and wore themselves out with just the construction of the causeway on which they hauled the stones. And I suppose this causeway was almost as great a project as the pyramids themselves, since it is 3,900 feet long, 60 feet wide, 50 feet tall at its highest point, and made from hewn stone sculptured with figures. So he's basically saying that in order to move the stones, right, from a location to location, he's saying that the Egyptians first spent 10 years creating a causeway, like a road, to travel the stones down to actually get them to the site where the building was going to take place. Now, there are some scholarly problems with his description of this causeway, and thankfully within my book, they do have editor's notes, writer's notes. They do have footnotes, right? And so I want to read you the footnote about this causeway. The author says, Herodotus writes that this ramp is 5 stades long, 10 fathoms wide, and 8 fathoms tall. That translated into the 3,900 feet long, 60 feet wide, and 50 feet tall. He appears to have confused the then existing causeway with the ramp that was built for the purpose of constructing the pyramid, which was removed after construction was complete. So this causeway that Herodotus was describing was there during Herodotus's time. but the footnote is stating that he is confused because this causeway was not used in the construction of the pyramid. The Egyptians actually created a ramp, right, leading up to the site, but this ramp that they created for the purpose of constructing the pyramid, they took it down after they were finished building the pyramid. So they're saying that Herodotus is confused. It goes on to say, so 10 years were spent building all this, as well as the underground chambers in the ridge on which the pyramids stand. Cheops had these built as his burial vaults, and he directed a channel of the Nile to flow around them so as to form an island. The pyramid itself took 20 years to complete. It measures 800 feet on each of its four sides and 800 feet in height, constructed of hewn stones fitted together with the utmost precision. None of the stones measures less than 30 feet. So Herodotus here is saying that the pyramid measured 800 feet on each side and it was 800 feet high. When in all actuality, he got the base of the measurements of the base of the pyramid quite accurate, but he was off a lot with the height. Actually, the pyramid, the ground level, the square ground level, is around 756 feet. He said 800, but the height is only 481 feet. So he is around 300 feet off with the height of the pyramid. He goes on to say, this pyramid was built like a flight of stairs, which some call battlements, others platforms. When they had completed the foundation level, they lifted the rest of the stones by means of a device made of short pieces of wood, raising them from the ground up to the first tier of stairs. When a stone had been lifted to the first tier, it was mounted onto another lifting mechanism standing on that tier, and from there it was hoisted to the second tier and to yet another machine. So here we're seeing that Herodotus is saying that the pyramid itself was built like a flight of stairs, right? And how they were able to do this, if you can imagine, let's say this is the first level of the pyramid, right? So they put all of these stones in place for the first level. So what the Egyptians did, he says that they had a device that was made of short pieces of wood that they used to hoist the stones in the air. Now remember, some of these stones are like 80 tons plus. And I think none of them are under 2 tons. So like a ton is like 2,000 pounds. So a 2-ton stone is like 4,000 pounds. So if you're talking about an 80-ton stone, that is a lot of weight. So he's saying what the Egyptians did is they moved all the stones into place and they made the first layer. Then they used this machine, right? This mechanism that they built with small pieces of wood, and they used that to raise the stones up to the first tier, right? And once they raised the stones up to the first tier, they put the stones in place and created in the flight of stairs mode the second tier. And so once this next tier was created, they used the same type of machine to raise the stones, and they would raise the stones up to the first tier, and then they would have a machine here, and then they would raise the stones up to this tier, and then they would build the next level. And so then you would have the next level, right? Building it in a flight of stairs type of pattern. So now they could take the stones from the ground floor, raise them up to the first tier, use the same mechanism made out of small pieces of wood to raise it up to the next level. Then they could take that stone, raise it up to the next level, and then they could build the next level. Once the stones were up there, they could use those to build the next level, and they continued this process until they had created the pyramid. Now, if that's true, that's pretty interesting. right? But this is how he says it was done. But in the footnotes, and just to be I mean, I just want to give you guys the footnotes as well, so you can see what the scholars are saying about what Herodotus is saying. They say that the description of this construction technique is probably false. There is no evidence of such devices. Herodotus may be influenced by Greek practices here. So what they're saying is possibly the Greeks had a way of moving stone using machines that could raise them up, and that they're not 100% sure that Herodotus is correct. This is why people to this day, they still say that they don't know exactly how the pyramids were constructed, because this account given by Herodotus isn't accepted by everyone. But it is still interesting to know that he actually gave this account, and it's a possibility that some of this may be accurate. You know, who knows? You know, think for yourself. So he goes on to say, um, either they employed as many devices as there were tiers, or perhaps they used one single machine that was easy to move from one tier to the next after they had removed the stone. I give both explanations here exactly as they were presented to me. So he's saying that when he was told about the construction of the pyramid, again, he's relating what someone told him about how it was constructed. A priest, he's saying, told him this. He's saying that he doesn't know if, like, let's say there's 20 tiers, 20 levels to the pyramid. He doesn't know if they had 20 machines, right? And they had a machine on for each tier to raise the stones up to the next level, or if they had one or two machines, and after they raised the stone up to the next tier, they raised the machine up, took the machine to the next tier, and then used that to raise it up as well. He's saying those are the two possible explanations that he heard, and then he is relating that to us. He goes on to say, after the structure was complete, they finished off the top tiers first and worked downward so that the lowest tiers at ground level were finished last. So what he means by that is, in the footnotes, it's saying, that is, the stones which were used to fill up the angles of the steps and make the side of the pyramid a smooth inclined plane were fitted and finished from the top down. The pyramids built by Cheops, Chephren, and Mykerinos are now known as the Great Pyramids of Giza near modern Cairo. Herodotus goes on to say, on the pyramid are written the quantities of radishes, onions, and garlic consumed by the workers. And to the best of my recollection, the interpreter said, as he read the inscriptions, that the total cost of these items was 1,600 talents of silver. If this was really the case, how much more are they likely to have spent on the iron with which they worked, and on the bread and clothing for the workers? So again, that the archaeologists say that no such inscription has actually ever been found written on the pyramid. So it's unclear what Herodotus is talking about here. Maybe he made it up, or maybe the whoever was his interpreter was just, you know, pulling his leg, or maybe they were actually telling him what they had to use to feed and pay the workers who built the Great Pyramid. And but as far as it being inscribed on the pyramid itself, that doesn't appear to be true. Maybe that was wrote on some type of papyrus scroll. Maybe that was some type of information that was preserved in a stele, or in some other form. But as of yet, these inscriptions have not been found on the actual pyramid itself. Okay. He goes on to say, and inasmuch as they built all this in the period of time stated earlier, I assume that the rest of the work, the cutting and transport of the stones, as well as the underground excavation and construction, must have required a substantial period of time. Now, Herodotus also mentions them using iron. Now, mainstream archaeology say that they did not have iron to use in the construction of the pyramid at that time, but Herodotus is saying that they did use iron. So, again, there's some discrepancy with mainstream and modern archaeology and scholastic consensus in the works of Herodotus. So did they have iron, to use? Herodotus says that they did. It's interesting to note, if you actually look up or Google the tools that they say the ancient Egyptians had during the time of Khufu with Cheops, you would see that it would appear to be quite impossible to carve those stones with the tools that they said that they had. So with Herodotus saying that they had different types of tools, even if they weren't iron, they had other types of tools that they used. In my mind, it would almost seem kind of plausible, right? Kind of possible, because when I look at the tools that they had to use, it doesn't seem possible at all for them to be able to utilize those tools to carve those stones, right? So the idea that there were other tools available seemed the only possible explanation, which, and in the rationale used in my thinking, gives Herodotus a little more credibility than mainstream on this particular point, because mainstream says they use something that seems impossible to use. Herodotus is saying that they had something else. My mind tells me that they had to have had something else, so I kind of lean with Herodotus on this. It goes on to say that the priest said that Cheops sank to such depths of wickedness that when he ran short of money, he placed his own daughter in a brothel and ordered her to charge a certain sum of silver, although they neglected to tell me the exact amount she was to demand. She did as her father ordered, but intending to leave behind a memorial of her own, she asked each man who came to her for the gift of one stone. And from these stones, they said, was built the pyramid that stands in the middle of the three that are situated in front of the great pyramid. Each of its sides measures 150 feet. The Egyptians said that Cheops reigned for 50 years, and that when he died, the kingdom passed to his brother Chephren, who continued to manage affairs in much the same way as Cheops had done, both in building a pyramid and in other respects, except that the size of his pyramid did not quite equal that of his brother. I myself actually measured them. Chepren's pyramid has neither an underground chamber nor a channel flowing from the Nile to surround it, as does the earlier one, which also has a conduit built inside it, through which flows a channel around the island on which they say Cheops himself lies buried. Chephren built the course of his pyramid of colored Ethiopian stone to measure 40 feet less than the other pyramid, and he placed it nearby. Both of them stand on the same ridge, which is approximately 100 feet high. So there you have the account of Herodotus about how the actual Great Pyramid of Giza was built. He says that they built a massive causeway, and it took 10 years to construct this, and they used that massive causeway to transport the stones. Now, he's not saying that they transported the stones entirely by land. Obviously, when you look at the amount of feet, the amount of distance between the quarry site and the building site, it's obvious that they had to transport some of these stones down the Nile. And earlier in the workbook too by Herodotus, he describes how Egyptians used barges or ships to transport stones down the Nile. There's also other papyri that one could read to see that the Egyptians used the Nile as sort of a highway. So it seems to be he's saying that they transported the stones from the quarry on a ship down the Nile And when they had to cross land, they had created this causeway to travel it across the land. And so he says they built one layer. It's built like a flight of stairs. They put one layer of stones into place. They used a machine made of small wood to raise the stones up onto that tier. They placed those stones into place and made the second tier in a stepped format. Then they used another machine to raise it from the ground to the first tier, from the first tier to the second tier. And they repeated this process all the way up. They would bring the stones up to the first layer. They would raise it up with the machine to the next tier. Then they would use a machine to raise it up to the next tier. They would use a machine to raise it up to the next tier, and on and on and on and on and on until they actually reach the top. So that is pretty interesting. As always, I hope I said something that you guys never heard before. If I did say something that you guys have heard before, I hope I gave more clarity to it. Now, before I go, quick commercial break. As you guys know, I am an author, and I appreciate everybody's support. The book Suicide Note is doing really, really well. We're selling a lot of copies all over the country. It's actually being sold in other parts of the world. So I want to just say thank you. I appreciate everybody that's showing their support. Now, if you haven't gotten your copy of Suicide Note, you can just go to Amazon.com, right? Type in Suicide Note by Matthew Daniels. I will also be putting the link to the book in the description. And if you're seeing this on Facebook or something like that, I'll actually be putting the link to the book in the comment section. So you just click that link. You can get it in paperback form for $15, or you can get it in ebook form for only 99 cents. So show your support. I really would appreciate it. And purchase my book, Suicide Note. I also have it's also available through Barnes and Nobles. Barnes and Nobles is actually selling it. Also, I have my book Thicker Than Water, right? So we got Thicker Than Water by Matthew Daniels. You can get that on Amazon for $17, the paperback version, or you can get the ebook for 99 cents. This is on Amazon.com. Show your support. Get my book Thicker Than Water also. And lastly, my third book that I have out is called Big Game Hunting. Big Game Hunting. You want to read this book. It's an autobiographical account of me taking on the corrupt police force in my area. So get that book, Big Game Hunting. Go to Amazon.com, type in Big Game Hunting by Matthew Daniels. You can get the paperback for $10, and you can get the ebook version for $1.99. Paperback $10, ebook version for only $1.99, and this as well is also sold on Barnes and Nobles. Thicker Than Water is only on Amazon, but Suicide Note and Big Game Hunting is on Barnes and Nobles as well. But if you only get one of my books, I suggest you get this one. Get Suicide Note. It is by far the people's favorite. This is my best-selling novel. So really check out that Suicide Note. Even if you have to just go read the synopsis, check this out. You won't regret it. So thank you guys for tuning in. Herodotus' account of how the Great Pyramid of Egypt was built. You guys have any requests for any books that you like, or any books that you have read, or any books that you have want to read that you would like me to do a video on, just let me know. I like interacting with you guys. But until next time, this your brother Matthew Daniels, aka Ampu, aka the Chosen Few, aka the Real Bookworm. I'm not a bookworm, I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, world, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. Hotel, cheers to that. I'm out.